Hey everyone, welcome to another Radical Randy Activist production. Today's meme, free trade, the real story. What free trade treaties seem to be about has little to do with tariffs and trade, and far more to do with elevating corporate rights over the laws of sovereign countries.
How can trade treaties do that?
Investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms allow foreign corporations to sue national governments, either directly as through Chapter 11 of NAFTA, or through their own government, as with the WTO, over non-tariff barriers to trade that threaten potential future corporate profits. These barriers include laws designed to protect culture, health, food safety, and the environment. This undermines democracy by taking public policy decisions away from elected governments and putting them in the hands of secretive trade tribunals of private commercial arbitrators with no right of appeal to real courts. Laws to protect the public are whittled down to the lowest common international denominator.
What sort of policies?
Given the dangers of fossil fuel-driven climate change, government support for renewable energy projects would seem vital, but several countries have had these subsidies challenged by WTO suits. And Canada is threatened with a NAFTA suit because the province of Quebec placed a moratorium on environmentally destructive fracking for natural gas. Challenges such as these have a dampening effect on future environmental and other public policy decisions.
What about national treatment rights?
These rights penalize governments for showing preference for purchasing goods or services from their own country's businesses. This discourages them from trying to promote local production and jobs, and helps lock them into globalized trade rather than relocalizing their economies. And the CETA treaty between Canada and the European Union would expand this national treatment requirement to include provinces and municipalities, compromising their ability to buy locally.
What are intellectual property rights?
These are a major focus of free trade treaties, forcing the rest of the world to adopt severe American-style copyright and patent monopoly protection. This can be seen with the TPP and its proposed intrusive power to force internet service providers to spy on their customers' downloads for possible copyright infringement. Also, drug patents would be extended, keeping cheaper generic versions off the market for even longer periods.
Do free trade treaties affect public services?
If governments allow domestic companies to privatize any part of a public service such as Medicare, education, water, etc., foreign corporations can sue to force open the privatization of the rest of the service, further commodifying and enclosing the global commons.
Well, at least free trade globalization gives poor countries some development.
Development often consists of building infrastructure to better serve foreign corporations and pillaging the country's resources, not in any real growth to help the people. These countries often become mired in debt to the World Bank, IMF, or other lenders to pay for this development. Globalization policies can then divert farmers from local food production to growing cash crops for export to help pay the debts, undermining the country's food security and independence.
What about banking?
Many free trade treaties also pry open the banking sector of developing countries, making their financial systems vulnerable to looting by foreign financiers, and further enmeshing them in the global casino with its sudden crashes.
At least free trade treaties like NAFTA have environmental protections.
These are just window dressing, side deals lacking the enforcement mechanisms of the main treaty.
Well, free trade is driven by the needs of the public, isn't it?
Free trade policy is driven by the agendas of big business in rich developed countries. Government trade negotiators work closely in behind closed doors negotiations with transnational corporations, trade advisors, and big business associations like the CCCE and the US Business Roundtable to implement policies on the corporate wish list. Labor, human rights, and environmental NGOs get little if any such privilege access. These treaties are typically negotiated in secret to avoid public scrutiny and democratic control. Written to enshrine corporate rights, they lock future governments into investor-friendly treaties, often to the detriment of the public interest.
Well, if there are problems with free trade treaties, these mistakes can always be fixed.
Far from being mistakes, these problems seem more like the real motive behind free trade treaties. Without them, it's hard to imagine that corporations or corporate media cheerleaders would still be so enthusiastic about free trade. Want a better world tomorrow? Fight corporate rule today. To view other YouTube videos in this series, just click on the Radical Randy Activist icon, or click subscribe, or search for Radical Randy Activist. For web and news sites, books, DVDs, and much more on this and other economic and political topics for Alberta, Canada, the US, and the world, check out EdmontonActivistResources.org. And for more information on the real free trade story, check out the books, DVDs, websites, and online videos by the following authors. Also, watch the Radical Randy Activist Corporate Rule video.